You are on the What I Never Saw channel. Enjoy watching.
I remember thinking I was being paranoid. Not at first, not when the small things started piling up. The late nights, the quiet phone, the change in her perfume. Back then, I chalked it up to grief, stress, maybe burnout from the law firm. Her father's health had been in slow decline for over a year, and it made sense that everything else in her life would spiral a little. But then came the day of the memorial, and I stopped making excuses. It was a cold, sharp Saturday morning in March. The kind of day where you expect the weather to match the occasion. Overcast, a little wet, like even the sky knew we were burying a good man. I arrived early, partly to avoid the awkward silence that might happen in the car with Gemma, but mostly to help set up with the family. They were good people, always had been. Her mother had asked me to help with the seating arrangements, and I did, thinking it was the least I could do. I naturally assumed, that I would be sitting beside Gemma. I was her husband, her partner. I'd known her father for nearly a decade, and he had once referred to me as the calm one. I thought that meant something. I thought on a day like this it would still matter. But when I stepped into the chapel, the seat beside her was already taken. I saw it immediately, third row from the front, center aisle. Gemma sat in a black dress I didn't recognize. Hair pulled into a soft bun, the way she wore it at depositions. And next to her, where I was supposed to be, sat a man I had never seen before. He didn't look like family. I know her family. This guy was different. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Sharp suit, polished shoes, rose gold watch, not flashy, but expensive. Like he wanted people to notice it without realizing they were noticing it. Clean trimmed beard. No wedding ring. They weren't speaking when I walked in, but I saw her reach for him. Just a small touch on his wrist. A 2-second contact. Enough to say something without saying anything. He gave a little nod like he understood the message. My feet stopped moving. I was standing in the middle of the aisle, stuck, blinking at them like someone had hit pause on my brain. It wasn't until I felt someone brush past me with an annoyed huff that I remembered to move again. I pretended to glance around like I was looking for someone, then slid into a pew across the aisle and 3 rows back. From where I sat, I could see the back of his head and the curve of her shoulder. She didn't turn around, didn't look for me, didn't notice that I had come in alone. The service began, and I told myself to breathe. That maybe he really was just a friend. Maybe I was being jealous. Maybe Gemma hadn't thought about who would sit where and just defaulted to whoever arrived first. But the rational part of me, the one that had sat through years of law school and mediated contract disputes worth millions, wasn't buying it. I knew the look on her face. I knew her body language. I knew the difference between grief and comfort, and whatever that man was to her, it wasn't just a shoulder to cry on. He wasn't just filling space beside her. He was occupying it, like he belonged there. She didn't flinch when he leaned closer during the eulogy. Didn't shift when their knees bumped. Didn't acknowledge me when the pastor mentioned sons-in-law. She wiped her tears with a tissue he handed her, and when she stood for the closing hymn, she brushed against him like it was muscle memory. After the service, I lingered near the entrance to speak with her mother. She hugged me tight and whispered something about how glad she was I came. I kept my eyes on the crowd as people filed out. Gemma and the man walked out together, slow, deliberate steps, like a couple used to moving in sync. He placed a hand on her lower back as they stepped outside, guiding her like he'd done it before. I followed a few paces behind, far enough not to be obvious but close enough to see which car they went to. It was a black BMW I didn't recognize. He opened the passenger door for her. She got in without looking back. He drove, and just like that, she was gone. Later that evening, when she returned home, I brought it up, as casually as I could. We were in the kitchen. She was taking off her earrings, pouring herself a glass of wine like it was any other night. "Who was the guy sitting next to you?" I asked. She didn't even blink. "Just a close family friend." That was it. No hesitation. No follow-up. She didn't offer a name, didn't ask if I wanted to meet him. She turned her back to me and walked toward the living room, sipping her wine like the day hadn't carved a hollow in both of us. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Didn't say another word. Could have pressed. Should have, maybe. But something in her tone, not defensive, just dismissive, made me realize that asking wouldn't get me anywhere. She didn't lie. She just made it clear I wasn't worth the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling while she scrolled her phone next to me, the blue glow lighting up her face. She didn't say goodnight. She didn't even look at me. Eventually, she turned off the lamp and rolled away, her back to me like a wall I couldn't climb. I used to think grief would bring people closer, that something like losing a parent would strip away the noise and remind you what matters. But in our case, it just pulled the curtain back. And what I saw behind it was a woman I didn't recognize. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment in the chapel, the seat already taken, was the first crack. The first undeniable proof that I wasn't losing my mind. That what I felt in my gut wasn't insecurity or paranoia. It was the truth scratching at the inside of my chest, trying to get out. We all lie to ourselves sometimes. Tell ourselves people are just busy, that they're grieving, that they need space. But grief doesn't make you forget your husband. It doesn't make you reach for another man's wrist in front of the whole family. It doesn't make you act like he's home and I'm just the visitor. That night, I stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise. I wouldn't ask again. I would watch. I would wait. And when the truth came, I'd be ready. Grief, I used to believe, was supposed to bring people together. But with Gemma, it was like someone had flipped a switch the moment her father died. No more quiet breakfasts. No shared looks across the room. No whispered conversations late at night. She moved through the house like she was renting it. Like I was the background noise she couldn't wait to mute. The memorial had been my wake-up call, the moment that finally scraped the fog from my eyes. But the truth is, the cracks had been forming for months. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Looking back now, I can pinpoint exactly when it started, about 6 months earlier. That was when Gemma began using the phrase client dinner, like it was some kind of holy shield. It became her go-to excuse for everything. Missed dinners, late nights, early mornings, random Saturday absences. It was always a client or a last-minute meeting. I remember the first time I questioned it. She was standing by the mirror, spraying a new perfume I'd never smelled before. Something floral, sharp, not like her usual vanilla and cedar. New scent. I asked, trying to sound casual. She paused just a second too long. A gift from a client, she replied, then turned to smile like it was nothing. She used to mock those morning yoga people, the ones who posted about their downward dog at 6 a.m. Now she was one of them. Suddenly, she couldn't start her day without vinyas and a green juice. The kicker? She never once invited me to join. Not that I'm a yoga guy, but it wasn't about yoga. It was about her world shrinking, and me no longer fitting inside it. She silenced her phone more often, left it face down during dinner, started password locking her laptop when she went to the bathroom. Something she had never done before in 8 years of marriage. If I so much as glanced in the direction of her screen, her shoulders tensed like I was invading some sacred territory. I'd always trusted her. Never snooped. Never needed to. We were solid, I thought. But slowly, I started noticing patterns that didn't quite sit right. Like how every Thursday night, she claimed to have strategy meetings that ran late. Same excuse, same time frame, week after week. But when I once offered to bring her dinner, thinking it'd be a sweet surprise, she told me not to. Said it would make things complicated. That word stuck with me. Complicated. One night, while she was upstairs showering, I passed by her laptop. It was open on the dining table, a browser tab still up, some hotel booking confirmation, 2 champagne flutes, king suite, no company logo, no work-related anything. I stood there staring at it, heart hammering in my chest. When she came back down and saw me near the laptop, her smile faltered. "What are you doing?" I gestured to the screen. "Thought you were working on client files." She glanced at it, then shrugged. "Oh, that? Just a demo page. I was helping a client plan an event. Nothing big." She closed the tab before I could read any more. Walked past me with a kiss on the cheek. Like it didn't matter. I told myself to believe her. Told myself it didn't mean anything. But it did. Things got colder after that. Our conversations became transactional. We talked about bills, errands, dinner plans, surface-level things that didn't require eye contact or vulnerability. She started sleeping on the far side of the bed, closer to the edge. Sometimes she claimed to fall asleep on the couch by accident, though the untouched throw pillow suggested otherwise. I knew she was pulling away, but what hurt more than anything was how intentional it all felt. Like she was creating a version of herself that I was no longer allowed to know. Then there was the trip to Boston. She told me it was a real estate seminar. 2 nights, quick turnaround. She packed light, took the early train. Sent one photo the entire time, a blurry sh*T of a conference room and a half-empty notepad. When she got home, she was wearing a necklace I hadn't seen before. New? I asked, gesturing toward it. She touched it, then smiled. Won it in a raffle. A raffle. She always had answers. Quick ones. Polished. Like someone who'd rehearsed. It wasn't just the big things, either. It was the small shifts, the way she stopped saying love you when we hung up. The way she stopped asking about my day. How she always seemed more alert when a specific text tone came through. The one she'd assigned to R. I asked her once, "Who's R?" "Just a coworker," she replied without missing a beat. Later that night, I opened our old wedding album. I hadn't touched it in years. I wanted to remember what we were, who she used to be. There was a picture of us dancing, both mid-laugh. Her face lit up like she couldn't believe she'd ended up with me. That smile was gone now, replaced with one that felt strategic, social, like something she put on for strangers. By the time the memorial came around, I was already halfway convinced something was going on. But watching her sit next to that man, watching him slide into the place that used to belong to me, was the moment everything snapped into place. The patterns weren't just patterns anymore. They were evidence. After the service, I waited until she fell asleep, or at least pretended to, and slipped downstairs. Her work bag was on the counter. I opened it carefully, more out of instinct than plan. Inside, a handwritten note. Short, folded in half. No date. No signature. "You were incredible today. He would have been proud of you. I'll always be beside you, no matter the room." My stomach dropped. Beside you. Not behind you. Not near you. Beside. Like in the chapel. I slid the note back into her bag and closed it. That night I didn't sleep. Again. But I didn't just lie there in silence. I started writing. I wrote everything I remembered. Every inconsistency. Every strange detail, every excuse I had swallowed. I needed to get it all out. Needed to see the full picture for myself. By morning, it was all there in front of me. 6 months of red flags lined up like puzzle pieces finally connecting. The Thursday meetings, the Boston trip, the champagne flutes, the silence, the rose gold watch, and the man at the memorial, the one she called a family friend. He wasn't a friend. He was the plan, and I had been moved off the board one careful step at a time. I didn't expect anything from the will. That's the part people don't understand when they hear what happened later. They think I must have known, but I didn't. I showed up to the estate reading because I thought it was the right thing to do, out of respect for the man who raised the woman I married. Gemma didn't ask me to come. In fact, she seemed surprised when I told her I would. "You don't have to," she said. Eyes on her phone. "It's mostly formalities." I shrugged. "Still feels right." She gave me a tight smile and said nothing else. That should have been the first clue. We drove up to New Hampshire separately. She said she had to arrive early to handle details, which I didn't push on. I followed a day later in my own car, checked into a modest hotel off the highway while she stayed at the lakefront family estate with her cousins and whoever else made the guest list. It felt like I was being kept on the perimeter of something. Like everyone had gotten a memo I wasn't copied on. The morning of the reading, I drove up the winding road toward the house we'd visited dozens of times during holidays and summer weekends. It looked the same. Trimmed hedges, black shutters, that old pine tree still leaning a few degrees off-center in the front yard. But the energy was different. Stiff. Controlled. Gemma greeted me on the porch like I was a neighbor dropping off a casserole. Cool smile, professional tone. Glad you made it, she said. Of course, I replied, watching her carefully. She wore a cream blazer and matching pants, sharp and minimal, like she was about to close a deal instead of grieve her father. Inside, the estate lawyer, a reserved man named Hal Whitcomb, sat at the long dining table with two assistants, stacks of manila folders in front of him. A few family members were seated already. I noticed Gemma's cousin sipping something from a stainless steel thermos, eyes bouncing between Gemma and the lawyer like he knew a twist was coming. I sat down quietly, 2 chairs down from Gemma. The man from the memorial wasn't there. Thank you all for coming, Hal began. Mr. Langston requested a formal reading for transparency's sake. I'll keep this brief and to the point. I expected land divisions, some sentimental gestures, maybe the yacht going to one of the cousins who had actually sailed with him. Nothing that involved me. I'd already grieved the man. I wasn't here for anything else. But that's not what happened. Hal cleared his throat, then opened the envelope. He read through the formalities first, some donations, artwork going to museums, a stipend for the caretaker. Then he paused and turned a page. To my daughter Gemma, he began. I leave the following: my personal journals, access to the wine cellar, and the contents of the storage room above the garage. Gemma smiled briefly. Then Hal continued. To my son-in-law Nathan Caldwell, I leave the remainder of my estate, including the house, investments, vehicles, and the yacht formerly known as the Meridian. The room froze. Gemma's head jerked up like she'd been slapped. Her hand clenched the side of the table. I heard someone exhale behind me, loud, stunned. Excuse me? She said, barely above a whisper. Hal didn't flinch. He reached for a second page, his tone unchanged. The decision comes after careful consideration and is based on specific observations and actions taken by both parties in recent years. This letter will be entered into official record. Mr. Caldwell was, by the deceased's own words, the only person who acted in the family's best interest during his final months. Gemma's jaw flexed. She turned sharply toward Hal. This has to be a mistake. He shook his head. It isn't. No, he wouldn't do this, she said, her voice rising. My father wouldn't just hand over his entire estate to. There's more, Hal said, holding up a hand. He asked that the following be read aloud. He unfolded a second sheet of paper. His eyes moved across the lines slowly. I, Robert Langston, do not make this decision lightly. My daughter has made choices that exclude her from inheriting the legacy she once claimed to value. Bringing a stranger into my home under false pretenses, mocking my condition, and treating the estate as a prize to be negotiated. These are not the actions of someone I can entrust with what I've built. The air went out of the room. Even the assistant next to Hal blinked hard, clearly caught off guard. Gemma sat perfectly still, but her face was turning a color I hadn't seen before. Rage, maybe. Shock. The kind that coils in silence before it strikes. Hal finished the letter. It is my belief that a legacy is not just about blood, but behavior. Nathan Caldwell treated me with dignity. He listened. He did not seek favor. For that, I leave him what remains of mine. The room was silent. Gemma's cousin leaned back in his chair, muttered "damn" under his breath, and took a slow sip from his thermos. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. This wasn't what I came for. I hadn't asked for it. I didn't want it. But there it was, the legal equivalent of a thunderclap dropped right in the center of the table. Gemma slowly turned toward me. Her eyes weren't confused. They were calculating. You knew about this, she said. I didn't, I replied honestly. She let out a bitter laugh. You expect me to believe he wrote you into everything and you had no idea? I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. That's convenient, she muttered. She stood, shoved her chair back so hard it nearly tipped. The lawyer tried to speak, but she cut him off with a raised hand. I'll contest it. You're welcome to try, Hal replied. But your father's documents are in perfect order. Witnessed, notarized, and recorded. I will contest it, she repeated, voice sharper. And you? She turned to me. You're not going to get away with this. I didn't do anything, Gemma, I said quietly. She looked at me like she didn't even recognize who I was. Like I'd suddenly become the villain in the story she thought she was narrating. But the truth was finally louder than her fiction. She stormed out of the room, heels echoing against the hardwood. No one followed her. Hal handed me a folder. I'd suggest reviewing this with your own counsel, he said. There are conditions you'll want to be aware of. Conditions? I asked, blinking. He nodded. Your inheritance comes with a clause. Something your late father-in-law insisted on personally. It's unusual, but enforceable. I took the folder without opening it. My hands were shaking. Outside, the sky had darkened. A storm was rolling in. I stood on the porch of the house that was now, technically mine, listening to thunder rumble over the lake, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Gemma's car was gone. No trace of her. No apology. No explanation. Just silence and skid marks on the gravel drive. I knew then that everything had changed. But I didn't know yet how deep it would go, or what that clause would say, or what it would cost her. I didn't open the folder right away. I left it sitting on the passenger seat the whole ride back from the estate, untouched. It just sat there, thick and beige, like it was daring me to read it. And maybe it sounds ridiculous, but I wasn't ready. Not because I was afraid of the legal jargon. I've worked through corporate bylaws with more pages than most novels. But this wasn't about paperwork. This was about the truth. And I already had more truth than I knew what to do with. I stopped at a gas station halfway back to the hotel and sat in the car with the engine running. Then finally, with a deep breath, I flipped open the folder. At the very top, clipped neatly to the first page, was a single paragraph on personalized letterhead. My name was typed in bold. Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here. But I expect you've already gathered that things didn't unfold quite the way Gemma planned. You always were more patient than I gave you credit for. You'll find that the estate is yours in full, but with one critical condition. If you ever reconcile with Gemma Langston in any legal or common law capacity, married, cohabitating, or contractually bound, 40% of the estate will be immediately and irrevocably diverted to the Caldwell Veterans Support Trust. I established this fund in your mother's name. She was tougher than both of us combined. This is not a punishment. This is clarity. I hope you live free. R.L. I stared at the page for a long time. Read it over. Then again. He hadn't just left me the estate. He'd left Gemma out and locked the door behind her. The clause was legally binding. 2 signatures required to remove it. His and the original estate trustees. And both were now either deceased or inaccessible. Which meant it was permanent. If I ever let Gemma back into my life, as a wife, a girlfriend, a roommate, or anything more than an occasional phone call, nearly half of the estate would vanish. 40%. Just gone. Straight into a foundation named after my mother. And I knew exactly what that would mean to Gemma. See, money to her wasn't just security, it was power, image, control. It wasn't about buying things. It was about standing above them. Having a legacy to point at. A version of herself to defend when the room went quiet. This clause didn't just cost her money. It severed the illusion that she could fix what she broke. At least not in the way she wanted to. I didn't say anything to her right away. I drove home the next day, packed up a few essentials, and stayed with a friend for the weekend. Gemma texted once, a simple, "Call me." I didn't. Monday morning, she showed up at my office. No announcement, no warning. Just appeared in the hallway like some shadow peeled itself off the wall. She was wearing gray slacks and a fitted blouse. More polished than I'd seen her in weeks, and holding a slim black folder in one hand. "Nathan," she said, knocking lightly on the doorframe. "Do you have 5 minutes?" I looked up from my desk. Not really. She stepped inside anyway, closed the door behind her. "I thought we should talk," she said, sitting across from me without waiting to be invited. I stared at her. Talk about what? Her voice was even. About the estate. About how this affects both of us. I raised an eyebrow. Both of us. She opened the folder slowly, like she was giving me time to adjust. Inside were printed documents, spreadsheets, charts, color-coded tabs. One of them had a projected timeline for property sales. Another broke down tax implications. "I've mapped out a division strategy," she said, laying a page flat between us. "Even though the assets are in your name, there are ways to approach this with mutual benefit. If we work together, we could liquidate certain holdings while still retaining." "No," I said, cutting her off. She blinked. "What?" "I'm not doing this with you, Gemma. This isn't personal," she said quickly. "It's strategic." I leaned forward. "That's the problem. You're still trying to strategize your way out of this." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I'm here because I'm trying to manipulate you? I think you're here because you didn't expect the clause." Silence. Her hands froze. She didn't ask how I knew. Didn't even bother pretending she didn't know what I was talking about. "You read it," she said quietly. "I did." Another beat passed between us, heavier than the first. "You realize how unfair that clause is, right?" she asked. I let out a small laugh. "To you. To both of us." "No, Gemma. It's not unfair to me. It's the only thing that finally gave me clarity." She stood suddenly, folder in hand. Her voice lost the calm edge. "You think I don't regret what happened? That I don't wish things were different?" I said nothing. "I didn't plan for any of this," she snapped. "My father manipulated you into being his pawn because he hated that I had control." "No," I said quietly. "He gave me a choice, and he gave you a consequence." She stared at me, jaw tight, like she was deciding whether or not to lash out. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. 3 days later, she came back. This time, she brought legal drafts. Agreements, asset evaluations, even a list of potential buyer contacts for the yacht. She handed them to my assistant with instructions to deliver them to me personally. I threw them in the bottom drawer of my desk. And I didn't reply. What she didn't know, not yet, was that she'd already tried to undo the clause. I didn't know it either until the envelope arrived. Came in the mail. No return address. Just my name typed. Inside was a single sentence typed on plain white paper. "Check the trust archive." The file was submitted 2 weeks before he died. I took it to Hal. He didn't seem surprised. He pulled a binder from the back of his office shelf and opened it to the correspondence log. Tucked between 2 signed agreements was a scanned PDF of an email from Gemma, dated 1 week before her father passed. She had tried to remove the clause, tried to file a revision request, claiming it was a violation of marital rights and emotionally coercive. But the trust required 2 sign-offs, hers and the secondary trustees. Only hers had been submitted, and the deadline passed before the other could respond. Her attempt had failed. She had tried to rewrite her future, and the law told her no. I thanked Hal and left. Drove for an hour with the windows down, just trying to think. It hit me somewhere around exit 14. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about the fact that she believed, somewhere deep down, that she could still win. And this clause? This was the first time in her life where charm, cleverness, and legal maneuvering weren't enough. This was something she couldn't delete. She couldn't unwrite it. She couldn't seduce it into forgetting. She had already lost, and she was just beginning to realize it. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy, no return address. It showed up a week after I spoke to Hal about the failed clause removal. I found it sitting on top of my mail pile like it had floated down from nowhere. No postage, no markings, just my name typed in clean block letters. At first, I thought it was from her. I'd been half expecting another delivery, some revised contract or proposal wrapped in fake civility. But this was different. No messenger, no business card, just the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No salutation, no signature. Just one typed sentence in the center of the page. She tried to erase more than you know. Check the estate files for any changes made after February 3rd. That was it. No other details. No handwriting. Just the kind of message that makes your pulse change tempo. I sat there at my kitchen table for maybe 15 minutes, rereading that sentence over and over. February 3rd. The date sounded familiar. I pulled up my calendar. It was the day after her father's last hospital admittance. 2 days before he went into hospice. That was when she started leaving the house for estate meetings. That was the week she claimed she was in back-to-back strategy sessions with the legal team. I hadn't asked questions then. I assumed it was grief and logistics. But now it felt like something else. I called Hal that afternoon. "Back so soon?" he asked, voice dry. "I need to see the post-February revision files," I said. "All of them, especially any drafts that didn't get finalized." He paused. "Any particular reason?" "Let's just say I got a tip." That was enough for him. An hour later, I was sitting in his office with 2 binders and a digital access log. Most of the entries were standard document reviews, asset audits, meeting notes. But then I saw it. A flagged file submitted under Gemma's name, dated February 4th at 9:12 a.m. Titled, Langston Trust Amendment Request V3. I opened it. It was a formal motion to strike the reconciliation clause from the estate, citing emotional duress, conflict of interest, and an unethical bias toward the surviving son-in-law. It was 6 pages long and loaded with language that framed me as a manipulator, someone who had exerted pressure on a vulnerable elder for personal gain. I kept reading, stomach tight. She even included examples. Visits she wasn't present for, private conversations I allegedly engineered, and unverifiable emotional claims made near the end of her father's life. The file made me sound like a con artist, like I'd wormed my way into her father's will with charm and timing. I stared at the screen. This wasn't damage control. This was premeditated. She hadn't just tried to erase the clause. She tried to rewrite the narrative entirely. Frame herself as the devoted daughter who'd been blindsided by a scheming husband. And here's the part that burned. She might have gotten away with it. She had the legal mind, the persuasive tone, the connections. But the second signature never came. The co-trustee, her father's former partner, had refused to co-sign. In the margin of the document, he'd scrawled one line in pen. "Not on my watch." He warned me about her. I sat back in the chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was an attempted cover-up. A quiet rewrite of the truth that almost worked. I looked at Hal. "Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" "I assumed you had enough to deal with," he said. "And frankly, I didn't think she'd come back after you rejected her terms." "Well, she did," I said. "Twice. And she's still playing this like it's chess." Hal tapped the edge of the binder. "You may want to change the locks on the estate. She's not staying there." "Not yet," he said. "But that doesn't mean she won't try." 2 days later, I got a call from a maintenance contractor the family had used for years. "Hey, Nathan," he said casually. "Just confirming the light installation for Friday at the lake house." I blinked. "What installation?" "The fixtures your wife requested. For the upstairs hallway and the guest bath." I paused. "I didn't approve any work." "Oh," he said, his tone shifting. "Well," she said. "She's not authorized." I said flatly. "Cancel everything. And if she shows up again, call me first." "Got it." I hung up and stared at my phone. Gemma was already making moves, still trying to inch her way back into the estate. One delivery, one fixture, one footprint at a time. It wasn't about light fixtures. It was about presence, claim, proximity. She was trying to reclaim the house not legally, but physically. I drove up that afternoon. The gate code hadn't been changed yet. I put it on my list but hadn't gotten around to it. I made a note to fix that the second I parked. Inside the estate, everything looked the same, almost too same. There was a water bottle on the kitchen counter, a coat hanging over the chair, small things out of place. Someone had been here. I checked the home logs. Sure enough, there were 2 entries under her keycard. One on Monday, one the day before. She had been coming and going without my knowledge, testing boundaries, reclaiming space. I walked through the rooms one by one. Most were untouched. But when I got to the upstairs study, the one Gemma used to call off-limits, I noticed something strange. The door was unlocked, and inside, The top drawer of her father's antique desk was open. Not empty, just open, like someone had been looking for something. I stepped closer. Inside, beneath a stack of ledgers, was a black flash drive tucked into a felt pouch. No label, no markings. I took it home, and that night, after making sure my firewall was locked tighter than a submarine hatch, I plugged it in. One video file, time-stamped February 1st. The footage was grainy, recorded from the built-in webcam of the estate computer. But the audio was clear. Gemma stood in front of her father's desk, arms crossed, visibly frustrated. Her father, slouched, tired, but alert, watched her quietly. "You're punishing me," she said. "I'm protecting my legacy," he replied calmly. "By giving it to him? He's not even blood. He's the only one who didn't treat me like a bank." She paced. "I did what you asked. I came back. I took care of things. I managed the estate." "You managed appearances," he interrupted, "and brought him into my house." The footage jumped slightly. Gemma was crying now, angry tears. "You don't understand what he's done to me." Her father didn't flinch. "No, Gemma, I understand exactly what you've done to yourself." He stood up slowly, steady despite his age. "You made your choices," he said. "I'm just making mine." The recording ended there. I stared at the screen in silence. This wasn't about me winning. It was about her finally being seen and rejected by the one person she thought would always forgive her. I ejected the drive, placed it in my safe, and locked it. Then I sat down and wrote out everything I'd seen, heard, and discovered, page by page. Not to hold it over her, not even for court. I just needed to document it, to prove to myself once and for all that I hadn't imagined any of it. This was real. She tried to rewrite the past, but she underestimated the one thing her father left behind: proof.